All right, hello again. I'm Jay Hicks with Gerald Properties, and this is Reviving Goolrick's. We're lucky to be back down on Caroline Street on site of Goolrick's to do a little digging into a little of the background and history of the building, as we've been getting into the depths of every aspect of the Goolrick's building and the features of it, the details, the history of it. We've continued with that theme and done a little digging around the basement. And out of that, we've caught the attention of local park ranger and public educator Ashley, who has been kind enough to spend some time with us in the dirt, finding all kinds of treasures. And at this point, I'd like to introduce you to Ashley, and let's discover with her some of the things that we've been learning about. We've been down in the basement, working around the foundations, getting into the dirt and the soils that are here, that we know have been here for a long time. And we're excited to know that you've found some things that have brought your interest enough to the level that you want to tell us about them.
I'm super excited to be here. I'm a local, proud Fredericksburg resident. I've been here for 15 years. This is my home. I'm very passionate about history.
Well, then you're in the right place.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to work for the National Park Service in the Chesapeake Bay for a couple of years. Okay. And so I learned a lot about Native folks that live out there, the historical tribes, and believe it or not, about oyster shells.
Okay.
Yeah. So
which have some significance here, apparently.
It does.
All right.
So I was walking through here in the basement. I asked Dave, I'm noticing a lot of oyster shells. Is it possible for me to look at them? Dave came here with me. We were crawling around the dirt and pulling up oyster shells. Okay. So if you know anything about archaeology, which I only know a tiny bit of, not a trained archaeologist, but usually when you pick up an object, the things around the object help you date it, how old it is. Periods. Yes. And so like around these pieces of shell, we found pottery, which we identified to 1808. Okay. Okay, right? So you've got 1808 pieces of pottery, and then you've got these shells. And they caught my attention because I immediately thought about the river. Why is Goolrick's here?
Why is Fredericksburg here?
Why is Fredericksburg here,
right? Right.
The Rappahannock River. It's just a stone's throw away from us.
Essential.
Yes.
Right.
So right outside of Fredericksburg, southeast of here, the water becomes brackish. So the Rappahannock River feeds into the Chesapeake Bay, right? The Chesapeake Bay waters mix with fresh water just south of here, southeast of here. Yeah. Perfect condition for oysters. Right. So when you look at an oyster shell, it's essentially a snapshot of the river's health in time. Okay. So if these pieces are from the 1700s, this oyster shell is around there. I'm assuming, you don't know, we didn't carbon date these oyster shells, but they are probably from around the same era.
We can theorize that they were put there about the same time. And we know from our history research that 1808 is about a time when construction was going on the site.
Right. So it makes sense that shells are here. You know, we found them probably in a trash bin, meaning that like in the 1700s, somebody was eating oysters, threw away broken pieces of pottery, and shells. But they're also in, the caulk here. So colonial builders used to crush up shell, to make into like a mortar that would go in between the bricks.
Much like we would with rock.
Yes. So why? Why do you think they used shell there?
I'm going to spoil you. I think it's because it's such a readily available resource.
You're amazing. That's exactly right. Okay. But when you walk around now, do you see oyster shells just hanging out?
Nearly to the tune of what we can expect that was back in the day.
So contact era, when the English come here, Native folks are raking them out of oyster shells just out of the river. Okay. Meaning that, like nowadays, when you get an oyster shell, you have to dive for it.
Yep, we dredge for them.
They're everywhere. Right. Okay, so that tells us, 1600s oyster shells. We know from Native American oral history as well, they used shells in tools, everyday life. They ate oysters. There were enough, to subsist off of the oyster. Right. George Percy, one of the first English colonizers that comes here in 1607, describes these oysters as very large and delicate in taste, which lay on the ground as thick as stones.
So they were everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Right.
Okay. It is no secret, that our rivers are becoming polluted. Okay. So if we are able to look at the shells and we're able to surmise maybe they're from the 1700s. Yep. So oysters are like You know how you date a tree?
Yep.
Like rings?
With the rings on 'em?
Yes. Okay, so there are little rings inside of an oyster shell, which let us know how old it is before it gets plucked up and eaten.
Okay.
And this is a baby. And so you can feel, right, in the hardiness of that.
Yep.
Okay? Yeah.
It's a real backbone.
This is, now in comparison, now feel kind of like a modern shell. Can you feel the difference
There's
between
not
them?
nearly the
Yeah.
robustness to it.
That's right. So about 1,000 years ago,
Okay.
there was a recent trash bin recovered, and you can see, look at those shells. They're
big.
monsters.
They're big.
Right?
Yeah.
And as we know, the colonists use them in everything because they are everywhere.
Right.
Okay, so why have the shells become smaller and thinner and harder to get over time?
The use of the river has had an impact.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Oyster shells, you already know this. What do oyster shells do to a river?
They filter the river.
Yes.
They help keep
Okay.
it clean.
Super important, right?
Right.
There are a lot of nonprofits out there that are focused on completely revitalizing the river by introducing oyster shells. Oyster shells oysters in general, do so much for the water. Not only, right, do they sieve the water from dirt and debris, but little microorganisms live on them, thus other things eat off of them. They function like a coral reef.
They're almost their own
essentially.
ecosystem.
They are, actually. So that's why they're trying to introduce them back into
Okay.
the rivers.
Gotcha.
So anyway, back to our 1700s, right, and back to our story. Modern oysters are a lot thinner because they don't have the same oxygen that pre-contact, right, even in the 1700s, that they had to thrive and grow big.
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
So what happens is that sediment gets pushed onto the oysters. The oysters don't have oxygen, therefore they are smaller and smaller and smaller.
Okay.
So how does this relate to Goolricks? Okay, we have that gorgeous shot of the shell in the wall, right? You can see like the actual physical shell used in like the caulk between the bricks.
Yep.
So Goolricks is a special place. It's been here for a long time. I think the original foundation was 1808. Is that right?
That sounds about right.
Okay. And why is this valuable to the town of Fredericksburg? Why is this valuable? The work that you're doing is because you're preserving the story,
Okay.
right? The shell is a little bit like Goolricks itself, right? It's a snapshot into a window of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pieces of history of what came before us and hopefully what we have in front of us as a future, right?
Okay.
We can see that the shells are getting thinner. We know that the shells are getting thinner and smaller. What can we do to keep our Rappahannock River healthy, right?
Right.
So that Goolricks can exist for another 1,000 years.
That's right.
Yeah, and continue to tell different stories.
Love it. Thank you so much for spending the time down here to get your hands dirty,
Yeah.
find the items that you found, and bring the history out of the dirt for us to enjoy, and the stories, the importance of Fredericksburg, the native residents of Virginia before we got here. This was honestly an unexpected story. Thank you for taking the time to bring it to our attention.
For really caring about the history and preservation of this place. It matters to me. It matters to me as a citizen here, and I'm proud of Goolricks.
Thank you for saying that, because it's what we've learned is that beyond the importance that we have in our own individual personal lives, it's truly important to a lot of people in our area.
Yeah.
It's something that has been a true
Invest in the
opportunity.
bones.
Well, it's something that's related to an investment, but it's more of an opportunity for us to carry forth something that so many people have appreciated, and we want it to continue to be cherished in the future. So that gives me a great lead in, Ashley, to tie this with a bow. And thank you for joining us again for this episode of Reviving Goolricks, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Please follow us on all our socials to stay up to date with the latest happenings.